Welcome, my darlings. Make yourself comfortable, and I have a tale to tell you. If you enjoy it, please be sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and leave me a comment. I always enjoy your comments. Now, let us begin. Hello, my darlings. Today I'm doing another one of Sabine Baringould's werewolf stories out of his book. He was a fairly famous clergy of the Church of England and wrote hymns and about werewolves. So, today we are doing Chapter 6, A Chamber of Horrors. In December 1521, the Inquisitor General for the Diocese of Besançon, Bayonne by name, heard a case of sufficient terrible nature to produce a profound cessation of alarm in the neighborhood. 2 men were under accusation of witchcraft and cannibalism. Their names were Pierre Bergon, or Peter the Great, as people had nicknamed him from his stature, and Michael Verdung. Peter had not been long under trial before he volunteered a full confession of his crimes. It amounted to this. About 19 years before, on the occasion of a New Year's market at Poligny, a terrible storm had broken over the country, and among other mischiefs done to it was the scattering of Pierre's flock. In vain, said the prisoner, did I labor in company with other peasants to find the sheep and bring them together. I went everywhere in search of them. Then there rode up 3 black horsemen, and the last said to me, "Whither away? You seem to be in trouble." I related to him my misfortune with my flock. He bade me pluck up my spirits and promised that his master would henceforth take charge of and protect my flock, if I would only rely upon him. He told me as well that I should find my strayed sheep very shortly, and he promised to provide me with money. We agreed to meet again in 4 or 5 days. My flock soon found, collected together. At my second meeting, I learned of the stranger that he was a servant of the devil. I forswore God and Our Lady and all saints and dwellers in paradise. I renounced Christianity, kissed his left hand, which was black and ice cold as that of a corpse. Then I fell on my knees and gave in my allegiance to Satan. I remained in the service of the devil for 2 years and never entered a church before the end of Mass, or, at all events, till the holy water had been sprinkled according to the desire of my master, whose name I afterwards learned was Moisette. All anxiety about my flock was removed, for the devil had undertaken to protect it and to keep off the wolves. This freedom from care, however, made me begin to tire of the devil's service, and I recommenced my attendance at church, till I was brought back into obedience to the evil one by Michael Verdung, whom I renewed my compact, on the understanding that I should be supplied with money. In a wood near Chastel-Caron we met with many others, whom I did not recognize. We danced, and each had in his or her hand a green taper with a blue flame. Still under the delusion that I should obtain money, Michel persuaded me to move with the greatest celerity. In order to do this, after I had stripped myself, he smeared me with a salve, and I believed myself then to be transformed into a wolf. I was at first somewhat horrified at my 4 wolves' feet, and the fur with which I covered all at once, but I found that I could now travel with the speed of the wind. This could not have taken place without the help of our powerful master, who was present during our excursion, though I did not perceive him till I had recovered my human form. Michel did the same as myself. When we had been 1 or 2 hours in this condition of metamorphosis, Michel smeared us again, and quick as a thought we resumed our human forms. The salve was given us by our masters. To me it was given by Moisette, to Michel by his own master, Guillemin. Pierre declared that he felt no exhaustion after his excursions, though the judge inquired particularly whether he felt that prostration after his unusual exertion, of which witches usually complained. Indeed, the exhaustion consequences on a werewolf raid was so great that the lycanthropist was often confined to his bed for days and could hardly move hand or foot, much in the same way as a berserker and hammering in the north were utterly prostrate after their fit had left them. In one of his werewolf runs, Pierre fell upon a boy of 6 or 7 years old with his teeth, intending to rend and devour him. But the lad screamed so loud that he was obliged to beat a retreat to his clothes and smear himself again in order to recover his form and escape detection. He and Michel, however, one day tore to pieces a woman as she was gathering peas, and Monsieur de Chauncey, who came to her rescue, was attacked by them and killed. On other occasions, they fell upon a little girl of 4 years old and ate her up, with the exception of one arm. Michel thought the flesh most delicious. Another girl was strangled by them, her blood lapped up. Of a third, they ate merely a portion of the stomach. One evening at dusk, Pierre leapt over a garden wall and came upon a little maiden of 9 years old, engaged upon the weeding of the garden beds. She fell upon her knees and entreated Pierre to spare her, but he snapped the neck and left her a corpse lying among her flowers. On this occasion, he does not seem to have been in his wolf shape. He fell upon a goat, which he found in the field of Pierre Lerunge, and bit it in the throat, but he killed it with a knife. Michel was transformed in his clothes into a wolf, but Pierre was obliged to strip, and the metamorphosis could not take place with him unless he was stark naked. He was unable to account for the manner in which the hair vanished when he recovered his natural condition. The statements of Pierre Bergot were fully corroborated by Michel Durand. Towards the close of the autumn of 1573, the peasants of the neighborhood of Dole in Franche-Comté were authorized by the Court of Parliament at Dole to hunt down the werewolves which infested the country. The authorization was as follows. According to the advertisement made to the Sovereign Court of Parliament at Dole, that in the territories of Espagne, Salvain, Corpenchon, and the neighboring villages, has often been seen and met, for some time past, a werewolf, who it was said was already seized and carried off several little children, so they could not have been seen since. And since he had attacked and done injury in the country to some horsemen who kept him, if only with great difficulty and danger to their persons, the said court, desiring to prevent any greater danger, has permitted and does permit those who are abiding or dwelling in the said places and otherwise, notwithstanding all edicts concerning the chase, to assemble with pikes, halberts, arquebuses, and sticks to chase and to pursue the said werewolf in every place where they may find or seize him, to tie and kill without incurring any pains or penalties, given at the meeting of the said court on the 13th day of the month, 1573. It was some time, however, before the loup-garou was caught. I'm going to interject here just a minute. It's fascinating to me that, particularly in France, since the werewolves were a very popular scapegoat there, men were charged with witchcraft through lycanthropy. The violent, strong creature that killed outright, versus the scheming witch who did potions and caused bad things to happen. And his shape seems to be naked and virile, while hers is also sexual, but much more covert. Anyway, I'm sorry. I'm rambling. I will continue. Ignore me. In a retired spot near Amanges, half shrouded in trees, stood a small hovel of the rudest construction. Its roof was of turf, and its walls were blotched with lichen. The garden to this cot was run to waste, and the fence round it broken through, as the hovel was far from any road, and was only reached by a path of moorland and through forest. It was seldom visited, and the couple who lived in it were not such as would make many friends. The man, Gilles Garnier, was a somber, ill-looking fellow who walked in a stooped attitude, and whose pale face, livid complexion, and deep-set eyes under a pair of coarse and bushy brows, which met across the forehead, were sufficient to repel anyone from seeking his acquaintance. Gilles seldom spoke, and when he did, it was in the broadest pathos of his country. His long gray beard and retiring habits procured for him the name of the Hermit of Saint Bonnet, though no one for a moment attributed to him any extraordinary amount of sanctity. The hermit does not seem to have been suspected for some time, but one day, as some of the peasants of Chastenoy were returning home from their work through the forest, the screams of a child and the deep baying of a wolf attracted their notice, and on running in the direction whence the sounds came, they found a little girl defending herself against a monstrous creature, which was attacking her tooth and nail, and had already wounded her severely in 5 places. As the peasants came up, the creature fled on all fours into the gloom of the thicket. It was so dark that it could not be identified with certainty, and while some affirmed that it was a wolf, others thought they had recognized the feature of the hermit. This took place on the 8th of November. On the 14th, a little boy of 10 years old was missing, who had been last seen a short distance from the gates of Dole. The hermit of Saint-Bonnet were now seized and brought to trial at Dole, while the following evidence was extracted from him and his wife, and substantiated in many particulars by witnesses. On the last day of Michaelmas, under the form of a wolf, at a mile from Dole, in the farm of Gorge, I know that's mispronounced, but I'm not going to try it, I'm having trouble, a vineyard belonging to Chastenoy near the wood of La Serra, Gilles Garnier had attacked a little maiden of 10 or 12 years old, and had slain her with his teeth and claws. He had then drawn her into the wood, stripped her, gnawed the flesh from her legs and arms, and enjoyed his meal so much that, inspired with conjugal affections, he had brought some of the flesh home for his wife, Apolline. 8 days after the feast of All Saints, again, in the form of a werewolf, he had seized another girl near the meadowlands of La Popeur, on the territory of Athumé and Chastenoy, and was on the point of slaying and devouring her, when 3 persons came up, and he was compelled to escape. On the 14th day of All Saints, also a wolf, he had attacked a boy of 10 years old, a mile from Dole, between Gredessin and Menoy, and had strangled him. On that occasion he had eaten all of the flesh of the legs and arms, and had also devoured a great part of the belly. One of his legs had rent completely from the trunk with its fangs. On the Friday before the last feast of St. Bartholomew, he had seized a boy of 12 or 13 under a large pear tree near the wood of the village. Perros had drawn him into the thicket and killed him, intending to eat him as he had eaten the other children, but the approach of men hindered him from fulfilling his intention. The boy was, however, quite dead, and the men who came up declared that Gilles appeared as a man and not as a wolf. The hermit of Saint Bonnet was sentenced to be dragged to the place of public execution, and there to be burned alive, a sentence which was rigorously carried out. In this instance, the poor maniac fully believed that actual transformation into a wolf took place. He was apparently perfectly reasonable on other points and quite conscious of the acts he had committed. We come now to a more remarkable circumstance. the affliction of a whole family with the same form of insanity. Oh, I'm glad he said that. I was just going to say this sounds like modern mental illnesses. Our information is derived from Bogier's Discours des Sorcières, 1603 to 1610. Pierrette Ganglion was a poor girl in the Jura who, in 1598, ran about the country on all fours in the belief that she was a wolf. One day, as she was ranging the country in a fit of lycanthropic madness, she came upon two children who were plucking wild strawberries. Filled with a sudden passion for blood, she flew at the little girl and would have brought her down, had not her brother, a lad of 4 years old, defended her lustily with a knife. Burnett, however, wrenched the weapon from his tiny hand, flung him down, and gashed his throat so that he died of the wound. Burnett was torn to pieces by the people in their rage and horror. Directly after, Pierre, the brother of Pierrette Ganglion, was accused of witchcraft. He was charged with having led children to the Sabbath, having made hail, and having run about the country in the form of a wolf. The transformation was effected by means of a salve, which he had received from the devil. He had, on one occasion, assumed the form of a hare, but usually he appeared as a wolf, and his skin became covered with shaggy gray hair. He readily acknowledged that the charges brought against him were well-founded, and he allowed that he had, during the period of his transformation, fallen on and devoured both beasts and human beings. When he desired to recover his true form, he rolled himself in the dewy grass. His son, Georges, asserted that he had also been anointed with the salve, and had gone to the Sabbath in the shape of a wolf. According to his own testimony, he had fallen upon 2 goats in one of his expeditions. One Maundy, Thursday night, he had lain for 3 hours in his bed in a cataleptic state, and in the end of that time had sprung out of bed. During this period, he had been in the form of a wolf to the witch's Sabbath. His sister Antoinette confessed that she had made him hail, and that she had sold herself to the devil, who had appeared to her in the shape of a black he-goat. She had been to the Sabbath on several occasions. Pierre and Georges, in prison, behaved as maniacs, running on all fours about themselves and howling dismally. Their faces, arms, and legs were frightfully scarred with the wounds they had received from dogs when they had been on their raids. Boguet accounts for the transformation not taking place by the fact of their not having the necessary salves by then. All 3, Pierre, Georges, and Antoinette, were hung and burned. Oh, well, at least they hung them first. Hopefully they were dead. Doesn't necessarily mean they were. Théophane Paget, who was a witch of the most unmistakable character, was also frequently changed into a she-wolf, according to her own confession, in which state she had often accompanied the devil over hill and dale, slaying cattle and falling on and devouring children. The same thing may be said of Claude Isan Proust, a lame woman, Claude Isan Guillerme, and Isan Roquet, who owned to the murder of 5 children. On the 14th of December in the same year as the execution of the Ganglion family, 1598, a tailor of Chalons was sentenced to the flames by the Parliament of Paris for lycanthropy. This wretched man had decoyed children into his shop and attacked them in the gloaming when they strayed in the woods, and had torn them with his teeth and killed them, after which he seemed calmly to have dressed their flesh as ordinary meat, and to have eaten it with great relish. The number of little innocents whom he destroyed is unknown. He sounds like Albert Fish. A whole cask full of bones was discovered in his house. The man was perfectly hardened, and the details of his trial were so full of horrors and abominations of all kinds that the judges ordered the documents to be burned. Again in 1598, a year memorable in the annals of lycanthropy, a trial took place in Angers, the detail of which are very terrible. In a wild and unfrequented spot near Caude, some countrymen came one day upon the corpse of a boy of 15, horribly mutilated and besplattered with blood. As the men approached, 2 wolves, which had been rending the body, bound a way into the thicket. The men gave chase immediately, following their bloody tracks until they lost them. When suddenly, crouching among the bushes, his teeth chattering with fear, they found a man half naked, with long hair and beard, and with his hands dyed in blood. His nails were long as claws and were clotted with fresh gore and shreds of human flesh. This is one of the most puzzling and peculiar cases which comes under our notice. The wretched man, whose name was Rollet, of his own accord stated that he had fallen upon the lad and killed him by smothering him, and that he had been prevented from devouring the body completely by the arrival of men on the spot. Rollet proved on investigation to be a beggar from house to house in the most abject state of poverty. His companions in mendicity were his brother John, his cousin Julian. He had been given lodgings out of the charity in a neighboring village, but before his apprehension he had been absent for 8 days. Before the judges, Roulet acknowledged that he was able to transform himself into a wolf by means of a salve, which his parents had given him. When questioned about the 2 wolves which had been seen leaving the corpse, he said that he knew perfectly well who they were, for they were his companions, Jean and Julien, who possessed the same secret as himself. He was shown the clothes he had worn on the day of his seizure, and he recognized them immediately. He described the boy whom he had murdered, gave the date correctly, indicated the precise spot where the deed had been done, and recognized the father of the boy as the man who had first run up when the screams of the lad had been heard. In prison, Roulet behaved like an idiot. When seized, his belly was distended and hard. In prison, he drank one evening a whole pailful of water, and from that moment refused to eat or drink. His parents, on inquiry, proved to be respectable and pious people, and they proved that his brother John and his cousin Julien had been engaged at a distance on the day of Roulet's apprehension. "What is your name and what is your estate?" asked the judge, Pierre. "Herald. My name is Jacques Roulet. My age 35. I am poor and a mendicant." "What are you accused of having done?" "Of being a thief, of having offended God. My parents gave me an ointment. I do not know of its composition." "When rubbed with this ointment, do you become a wolf?" "No, but for all that, I killed and ate the child, Cornier. I was a wolf." "Were you dressed as a wolf?" "I was dressed as I am now. I had my hands and my face bloody because I had been eating the flesh of said child." "Do your hands and feet become paws of a wolf?" "Yes, they do." "Does your head become like that of a wolf? Your mouth become larger?" "I do not know how my head was at the time. I used my teeth. My head was as it is today. I have wounded and eaten many other little children. I have also been to the Sabbath." The lieutenant criminel sentenced Roulet to death. He, however, appealed to the Parliament at Paris, and this decided that there was more folly in the poor idiot than malice and witchcraft. His sentence of death should be commuted to 2 years' imprisonment in a madhouse, that he might be instructed in the knowledge of God, whom he had forgotten in his utter poverty. So quoth this raven. And I think that last line really says it all. The poverty, the mud and muck these people lived in and tried to eke a living out of. That could give way to mental illness and other such delusions. Have a good day, darlings. I'm giving up because the street sweeper just won't leave. What? You're still here after the whole story? I really appreciate that, darlings. Please hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't. And I always love to hear from you. Have a glorious day, my darlings.